Welcome, game dev adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today we're talking about worker co-ops with Squinky and Jess of Soft Chaos.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
Come all to the very best podcast on the planet for game developers. In our live magical podcast, we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. As always, I'm your host here, Willem Delventhal, the headmaster at the Indie Game Academy, and joining me today is D. Squinkifer and Jess Rowan Marcotte, 2/3 of the founding team at Soft Chaos. I am really excited to be talking about worker co-ops. I actually got the chance to meet Jess and Squinky at GDC this year at one of their talks about co-op. This is a growing business entity in the indie game world, and it's kind of a fascinating one. It's something that I even considered and talked with my team about after going to your very good GDC talk. So welcome to the show, Squinky and Jess. What are you having for lunch here today?
I'm having a blood orange, actually,
Oh,
as part of my lunch, but technically breakfast.
Yeah.
okay.
I'm having coffee. I will have my actual lunch probably sometime after this call.
That's good. What time is it for y'all right now?
It's noon.
Okay.
Just a bit of a late riser today.
Yeah,
That's
yesterday was a holiday in Canada, so that may contribute to us getting up late.
Today's an easy day. I, as a person who works remotely, I will tell you I wake up later than I should, more often than I should. So I feel you. Well, welcome to the show. I think coffee is probably one of the most common answers to what are you having for lunch. Nobody's ever eating lunch. Indies never follow like a strict normal schedule, I think. And then a blood orange is that it? Is that the entirety of the breakfast?
Also this amazing sheep's yogurt, apple maple yogurt that I ate before, and some nice crunchy peanut butter on toast.
Dang, that's a pretty good answer. I gotta say, I am just sipping on Dunkin' Donuts coffee, so y'all have got me beat. Welcome to the show. It is fantastic to have you both on. Worker co-ops are definitely a sort of growing topic in the indie game world. I think there's a frustration in general with the AAA hire and fire cycle, and even with the more indie side of things, even with the process of building a studio and then going and finding a publisher and then getting booted by that publisher or canceled by that publisher or any one of a myriad of different things that can go wrong. So worker co-ops are definitely a little bit more exciting. I am pumped to talk about that with y'all, but before we get there, I of course want to start with our typical first question here on the show, which is the origin story. So Jess and Squinky, tell me your origin story. How did you get to where you are in games today?
Squinky, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I first started making games about like 25 years ago. When I was when I was still in high school. So basically, I hung out on internet forums, mostly like with like fans of LucasArts adventure games. So there were some like development tools we found back in like that people were making back in the day that I got to play around with. So I got my start making point and click adventure games. And then from there, I wound up in doing an internship at Telltale back when they still existed.
Ooh,
This was
yeah.
super early days, like in 2006. So that was my first job in games. So I also like from there, like after I graduated from my undergrad degree in computer science, I wound up working at a few little studios, also doing some contract work here and there. And ended up going to grad school, and so I did a degree in digital arts and new media, and kind of went for more of like an experimental arts kind of thing. And yeah, spent and then once I So that was over in Santa Cruz, California. Before that, I had done my undergrad in Vancouver, BC. Like kind of like yes, west coast of Canada down to California. Um, and then wound up in Montreal, where I met Jess and our other Future Soft Chaos co-founder over dumplings, and started a PhD, and but then like quit after 3 years, and
Oh,
got really into like. Got really into the idea of forming a worker co-op sometime around then. This was kind of like around the time that like union talk was like starting to pick up steam in the game industry when like the Game Workers Unite thing all started. But yeah, I really wanted to form a co-op for a while, and it just so happened that my favorite two people ended up being available, so we did it.
that's awesome. All right, and then Jess?
So, my background is actually in like English creative writing and like communications originally. I have a master's in creative writing. And then sometime halfway through that master's, I sort of accidentally fell into games through like a small contract I was doing at a games lab. And so I made my first game and then I just sort of never stopped because there were always these other opportunities to keep making. Montreal, at the time at least, was really, really good for that. So lots of programs for new game makers. I did the Pixels incubator as a follow along. Highly recommend Pixels activities. They have some online stuff as well as some in-person stuff. They're really supportive of folks of marginalized genders. Um, we From there I joined an incubator called Critical Hit, which I eventually wound up running, and just like kept on making games. Decided to do a PhD in games, the same PhD program that Squinky was in, although I started first. And that gave me the chance to make a lot of really experimental stuff, especially around alt controllers and like hybrid games and like interactive theater and other stuff like that, which is something that I really love. Uh, and so I finished the PhD and was also very passionate about workers' rights. And we kind of started Soft Chaos for ourselves, obviously, because this is like practically like a marriage contract. It's serious business to like throw your lot in together with other people legally this way, but also to explore the co-op model to be able to help other folks understand it better. So, we were in contact with Game Workers Unite, and we're kind of like, what if we saw like how hard can it be? Like, what is involved? Like, how do you do this? And so that's sort of how we got to today. On top of Soft Chaos, I also do work with like I have worked with large NGOs like UNHCR and the WHO, and generally, made my way here by being someone who likes awkwardness, social justice, equity, and being a pain in the ass, I guess. um, and
Very
I
useful
guess like
skill.
speaking of weird, awkward, intimate, interactive theater and games work. I wanted to let y'all know that we are in the pre-launch phase of crowdfunding a game called Strangers on the Net that we designed during the beginning of the pandemic for a theater festival that plays entirely over Discord as kind of like a play-by-post game, and it's about being a teen on the internet in the late 90s. Who likes a particular ensemble cast fandom and role plays in that fandom while also like figuring out their identity and stuff. Yeah, I'd love to share that with y'all.
Amazing. Yes, absolutely. So, the why don't you drop the link in the chat here, and then for anybody who
Yep.
is listening to the recording later or is watching on stream, it will be in the description down below. Absolutely
Chat.
support your indies. Yes.
It's actually a huge help if you follow us early because this is part of RPG Party. You get a POG, either an STL or a like physical POG that we will make for you for following early if you also back. But we will get extra support from GameCown's RPG party the more followers we have. So,
Nice. It costs y'all nothing to follow Kickstarter, and in this case, GoFundMe campaign or GameFound, excuse me, campaign. I saw the G and assumed. So follow everybody, support your fellow indies. Lovely. What a good introduction. I'm actually curious. Before I think we got to start with a sort of definition of co-op. But even before that, I want to hear, what is the very first game you made? What did you use to make that very first game for both of you?
Oh my
All
gosh.
right. Okay, so way back in the day.
Before the
Yeah.
rings of power were forged. Yeah.
Yes, so my very first game
Mm-hmm.
was called Cubert Badbone PI.
Wow.
It was like it was about this alien detective where who is like solving a mystery where all of the human tourists are going missing.
I think I found it
um
on Attic of the Underdogs.
oh
Does that
yeah,
sound
that's
familiar? Oh yeah.
yeah, probably very ancient.
Designer
And
Squinky.
yes, yes. And I used a game engine that was called Sludge. So it was kind of a play on Scum, which was the LucasArts Lucasfilm Games in-house engine. So it was very much like yeah, a play on that.
Beautiful. And what about you, Jess?
Uh, I I believe that I used Construct 2 for my first solo game. And it was a game about like it was very small, like very basic game about being a scuba diver and like collecting trash underwater, but like making it back within like the safety rules of scuba, like keeping enough air in your
Ooh.
tank and
Did you have to like
that sort
descend
of
at a
stuff.
certain rate and stuff like that? Ascend at a certain rate?
It
Was the
you
was the
know
bends a part of the game?
that in I think it would have been if I had had the time in the program that I was in, which was really
Mm,
just like baby's first game. But
mhm.
uh, yeah, I don't think it's available on the internet any longer. And I think for that particular one, I'm a little glad for that.
Amazing. Awesome. Yeah, I was just curious because Squinky, you were talking about doing, I think you mentioned some modding or some game editing that you played around
Yeah.
with early on.
Like not quite modding,
Mm-hmm.
but just kind of more I guess in a way like yeah, trying to reverse engineer
Mm,
old 90s point and click adventure games.
got it.
I was pretty familiar with the Scum VM project, which is like still exists actually. Um, and some of my old games actually work on Scum VM. Weirdly.
That's
Somebody
really cool.
decided to make them work. So that was kind of cool.
Wait, I just looked it up, and the second entry is your game. Amazing. So fascinating. I love the early days of the game industry. Like we really are. I think something I try to like push to our students in our community is that we really are still ultimately in the early days of the game industry. We're starting to become obviously a developed, defined industry. But like it's within our lifetimes. The people who figured out the beginnings of games are still alive right now making games. We really are. It's still pretty early days. I myself got started with Halo Combat Evolved and Warcraft 3 modding, which man, that was fun. All right, let's talk about Worker Collective. So, can I get a 101 for dummies definition of what a co-op actually is?
I think I will preface this by saying that from a legal standpoint, it's different everywhere. Even within Canada, which is where we are, it's different from province to province. And so how you
Mhm.
will legally make this work and whether there's like an actual legal structure in your state or in your province or country that is called like a worker co-op will vary very widely. But the very basic idea is that in a worker co-op, the ownership of the company is shared by its members rather than, being kind of like owned by a single boss or like a group of people who are benefiting from that labor without necessarily doing part of that labor.
Mhm.
Um, it's also usually, democratically controlled. So you might put people in a larger co-op in charge of like, representing you or making parts of those decisions, but every member of a co-op gets a vote. So business decisions are not made unilaterally, but there's input from the workers. Um, Another important part is that like a worker co-op can be a for-profit business just the same as an LLC. There are some worker co-ops that are not. Our bylaws are part of what governs our behavior. So we have like a list of rules that we've made that are legally binding to us. And in Canada, in Quebec, like, you must have bylaws. And those help, guide the direction of the co-op and the way that we want to operate beyond, you know, one person's vision and beyond, like, if Squinky, Allison, and I were to pass the co-op on to someone else, they would still be bound by those bylaws, which help make sure that, like, make sure that the values of the co-op are respected. Depending on your co-op, you might have external shareholders anyway. Soft Chaos has chosen not to. And I think one of the coolest things about worker co-ops is that they have higher survival rates than other companies year over year. Like that number is really consistent because, most companies fail. That's just the reality of starting a business. And worker co-ops tend to survive longer, more successfully. Beyond that, I think, the main thing really is that the workers own the business together and make decisions together. There are lots of other aspects that may vary from place to place and region to region for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For tenant, oh yeah, go ahead, Swinky.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that we are specifically talking about a worker co-op. There are different kinds of cooperatives as well. Like there's like consumer co-ops and producer co-ops. And that is like more outside the scope of what we are talking about today.
Got it.
Mhm.
Okay. So then for a couple of questions, because I have generally worked in the for-profit space, and I've generally worked with like LLCs, little baby guys. So is yeah, a couple of quick questions. It is still a for-profit. Your worker co-op is still legally a for-profit. Is that correct?
We're still legally for profit, yeah.
Okay.
Although we don't pay dividends, which we don't pay dividends specifically because it also gives us access to other opportunities that a co-op that does pay dividends wouldn't have. But we are a for-profit enterprise. We are looking to make enough money to help our members survive, for
What a
sure. And
concept.
yeah, it's not a nonprofit. Yeah.
Got it. Awesome. And then, so the fact that it's worker owned is definitely really interesting. I'm curious. So, what is um, I have run LLCs or worked with LLCs in the past that give pretty generous shares to their workers. How is it distinct from just a company that just gives a good amount of equity to their workers?
I think one of the main things is like, that no matter your seniority, no matter how much of those you've accumulated in terms of, your shares, everyone has an equal vote on these aspects of like on, not necessarily on all aspects of the company, but on like big decision making on um usually on most issues, really.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. And then the other thing I'm just curious about is, can you take investment? And what happens if you take investment? Do they also get a seat at the table to make votes, or do they not unless they're actually actively working with
So you can take investments as a worker co-op. Uh, we've chosen not to have external shareholders ourselves. So in terms of the nitty gritty of that, like I can't really necessarily speak to that, but I think it depends on what agreement you make. Same as anything else. Like you get to decide what you're agreeing to in exchange for what. And so yeah, make sure that that aligns with what your worker members want, I guess.
Awesome. Super interesting. It's definitely something it's crossed my mind, and I think it's crossed the minds of many developers. So how about this? what do you feel is somebody who's considering doing a worker co-op? When do you feel like it is the right case to use a worker co-op, and what are some of the ways that what are some of the reasons that you two chose a worker co-op as opposed to some other structure?
Yeah. I think like finding the right people, ideally like people you have like made a game with before, is kind of my advice. And people you like, you get along with, because like, yeah, I guess like as with starting any kind of business, but a worker co-op especially, like you really need to trust and respect the people you're going to be co-founding a thing with.
I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more with that one. No matter what you start, let me just echo that one more time to anybody who's listening. Don't start a business with somebody that you don't inherently trust, respect, and care about. It's bound to be a bad time. All right, sorry, Jeff. What were you about
Oh,
to
no
say?
worries. Yeah. Big time. I'll third that. I think that as long as you're doing it with people that you trust, it is true that in a worker co-op, you are responsible for things that normally management would be responsible for. So
Mhm.
that's something to keep in mind. And you sort of share. Okay, I want to make an important distinction. It is a legal entity separate from you. So like you share responsibility for its success or failure. Uh, but not necessarily like, I'm not saying that you share like legal responsibility from like your own financial situation or anything like that. Uh, but yeah, so it is something that like starting a business is always going to take work, and for most people it takes sweat equity. Uh, but yeah, like I guess that's not something to be taken lightly in any business. So I don't know that it differs that much from other businesses necessarily. But you need your founding members to be ready to commit to the work of starting a business with you.
Right.
That's the main thing. Otherwise, I think like almost anybody who is thinking of starting a very small company, but who believes in workers' rights and who wants to see conditions improve in the industry, and who also wants their business to have a higher chance of survival,
Mm.
should consider forming a worker co-op. It's more equitable. You don't have to be a boss. You don't have to uh, uh, unfortunately, the values of worker well-being and the values of maximizing profit are not necessarily always aligned. And so I feel like the worker co-op model, again with the right values and bylaws, can be a bit of a guiding light in terms of balancing that out, of being like, yes, we want to make profit, but like not just profit for the sake of profit for the well-being and goals of our members. Yeah, I think like everyone should consider it, but considering it is not the same as it being like the right time for you to necessarily do it right this second.
Mhm.
But I do think if you plan to like have a fairly sizable or even just a small team of like three or more, it's a great model to consider. Um,
Okay.
if it aligns with your values, for me, it really does.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess to add to that, like it's like you don't need to become a legal structure right away. Like it's like only get to that point when you need it. Like for instance, we didn't end up incorporating until like it became time. It's like, okay, well, they're giving us money. We need a share bank account for this. But yeah, you can it's like you can get started like just making games together, and like I guess like trying out your working relationships that way.
Mhm.
And it's like yeah, you don't have to go right into the whole like the whole like forming a studio and formally incorporating kind of thing, just just right off the bat. That is like
Yeah, we've
a
been
step you do when you need it.
we've been working together since I think 2015.
Yeah, so
Like,
10
and
years.
we only legally founded the co-op in 2021. So we definitely
Okay.
had a long history of working together on different projects before we made that leap.
Yeah, I think that's really sage advice for everybody. It is you don't need to incorporate until like money comes on the table and until like significant money comes on the table. So you can still monetize the game without a legal entity. You are accepting more legal risk. Somebody could, let's say, if they had a seizure from your game or something, they could legally come after you instead of the business, and that is risky for you to know. But for the most part, you don't necessarily need a business entity, and it keeps your lives simpler for a while for you to not do so. I am, as you said earlier, Squinky, huge advocate for building not just one game, but like a couple of games with the people that you're considering founding with before ever having legal conversations, because in the words of one of my favorite business mentors, it's a marriage. Like, founding a company with somebody is incredibly intimate and rivaled probably only by like a life partner. So definitely don't do that with just anybody, and like make sure you like this person and want to talk with them at 3 in the morning about the build being broken. If you can't handle that with somebody, then it's not going to go well. All right. So I am curious then, it sounds like the main places that you'd advocate for a worker co-op is if somebody really cares about worker rights. They care about they tend to want to stay on the small side, and they care about profit being used for the well-being of the workers, at least for a worker co-op. I am curious, does this model work, or do you perceive it working at a larger scale? So maybe not even like AAA scale, but let's say it's like a 15 to 50 person company. You've got multiple games going on, I think is one of the big things I'm curious about. Does a worker co-op work in that case, or does it have to stay on the small scale for it to really be sustainable and usable?
Well, I will say that our experience is at a small scale. That being
Mhm.
said, that we have lots of examples from other industries of worker co-ops working at very, very large scales, like
Mm.
thousands of people.
Mhm.
And I think that that's where the one vote, one member thing comes into play even more, in the sense that you need people to represent your interests at meetings that 1,000 people can't come together and hash things out at.
Mhm.
So how you structure that becomes more important. But otherwise, I think it absolutely can work at like all these larger scales. It's just that the things that you put into place and the structures that you need to build, much like with any business, expand at the same rate. Like you need, we're three people. We don't have an HR person at this point, but if we were 15 to 20, we probably would have someone
Mhm.
involved at that scale. Yeah, there's going to be just a lot more structures that have to go into place, but those structures don't necessarily meaningfully look that distinct, except for the fact that you're representing other workers' interests, probably funneled through representatives, or something of that nature.
Mhm. They have an org structure to sustain the larger like population, but ultimately the core principle of one member, one vote still functions just fine at a larger scale.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm. Awesome. Okay. And then I know that with co-ops, there's often some form of a buy-in. Is that something y'all are familiar with? Like, how would you go about adding a new member at this point if that were to happen?
Yeah. So
Sure.
the way.
Oh, please go ahead, Spinky.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, most co-ops do have a probationary period, or like a provisional membership period,
Mhm.
like 6 months to a year or something. And we basically have something like that in our bylaws, saying that it's like if somebody has worked with us on a certain number of projects, or and for like a certain amount of time, then they become eligible for membership.
Hmm.
We have not yet had anybody we've had people do contract work for us, and we've had people do repeat contract work for us. But yeah, if one of them were to signal interest in becoming a member, and they have worked the required amount with us, then that's how they'd be onboarded. So you all basically already have to have a relationship to become a full member, and that's pretty standard among among co-ops.
in Quebec at least, it's like legally required that there be a path to membership, and
Hmm.
that's really important, right? Because worker co-ops can be just as exploitative as other forms of business if there are no structures in place to like help keep you aligned with your values. So, having a path to membership rather than keeping someone, perennially a contract worker is really important,
Hmm.
and helps support that structure of equity and care.
That's really interesting. Is the and then the bylaws, I assume, are the three of you putting that together before the structure was actually formed, and then after the
Mhm.
fact, there's some sort of amendment path, I assume, like workers can propose changes, and then that gets voted on by the body.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly how it works. Yeah. So, what sometimes it's just fixing a typo, sometimes it's like, you know, restructuring things based on lived experience with the business, or
Mhm.
on like changing needs, changing laws. Yeah, and basically that document is crucial, whether or not you are able to legally form a structure called a co-op where you are, or whether you have to, rework another structure to make it into a co-op. The bylaws are a very important document.
Mhm. Super fascinating. Okay, so before we're gonna move into community questions here in just a second. Before then, I would love to give you the chance to soapbox for a moment. So give me the pitch. Why are worker co-ops important? Why do you believe? Why did y'all, choose to bring this as your business entity, and why do you choose to advocate for it on platforms like this or a GDC? Like, why worker co-ops? Why do we need this?
So I think, for me, again, worker co-ops not a panacea, but I think that
Mhm.
worker co-ops have the best chance of keeping people in the industry longer, which means, better livelihoods for game developers. I think they have the best chance of helping us make great games together. Like we know that teams that work together longer just tend to, find a flow, make better work together. I think that worker co-ops, help folks have a voice in the work that they do, for their own values as well. If you have a vote, you get to vote on what contracts maybe your company is going to take and with who. And, given the way that game tech is used in a wide variety of places, including military applications, I feel like that's important. And I think, yeah, like less burnout, better health, better working conditions, better pay, hopefully over time, because you are setting the conditions and you are also more cognizant and like aware of the conditions that your business is under. So you are more involved in making the best decisions for the greatest number of people and for yourself. Um, that's my little soapbox.
Yeah. I think my soapbox is like, as we all know, like the industry is really rough economically right now.
Really?
Yeah, who'd have thought? Oh my. Yeah, as and like, I guess, yeah, just things are rough all around. Things have been rough specifically in games for a while. We keep just like hearing about random layoffs and like to the point that it's kind of like become routine. We've heard about like
Mhm.
entire studios shutting down. Like Telltale, the very first studio I ever worked for, back when I was a wee babby, is one of those.
Which
And
is
then I
wild because it was such a giant for a while too. It's one of
it
those
was
ones
such
that
a
is just
giant.
amazing. Yeah, that it's got shut down.
Yeah, and then yeah, various things happened, and then like eventually, like it had to close. They just ran out of money.
Yeah.
Um, so like imagine if all of the workers there, all of these talented people, like actually had a say in like what would happen like if the company got to a point where where it like lost all its money, it's I mean like I guess like one thing is that like membership in a co-op does not have to necessarily mean that you are like employed by the co-op.
Mhm.
It's like, all right, well, I guess you have to lay everyone off, but then you are all kind of still members, and then you get to decide what happens next with, I guess, like the brand and all that stuff.
Mhm.
Like what happens next with all the work you have done up to this point. I guess that
Yeah.
is like, yeah, just one example. But even before you get to that point, like deciding, like it's like you don't just get one person deciding. It's like, oh, we had like we blew up huge with our like Walking Dead equivalent. Now we have to keep making more and more and more of those. And hiring lots and lots of people to to make more and more of those. And it's like it's kind of like, all right, well, what if you what if you like maybe all of the workers would choose to do exactly that, but maybe they would decide to do something else.
Mhm.
um I guess in a way, like in a sense of like it's like you as a founder are like it's like you start with control, but you also come into it planning that like you will share that control. You are
Mm.
not going to be like the sole person making all of the decisions. And like personally, like that like I find that a lot more comforting than like this idea that I or even the three of us would always be the ones making all of the decisions for all time forever.
Mm. Yeah, that is a really I love that last statement, that last sentiment. That's something that I think is quite revolutionary actually, and is quite different from especially the American way, I think, but just the way of capitalism. The concept that you are creating something meaningful, creating something potent, hopefully that can make money and sustain itself, and you're doing that, including all of the intense amount of work that foundership takes, with the intention of giving up control. Like that is foundationally very different from how typical businesses do things. And I think that's really beautiful. It also hopefully, I mean, my biggest problem with the game industry, I love the game industry. I will never leave this space despite how tough say it can be. But it is what fatigues me the most is the hire fire cycle. Is the people with the big money, they bring on somebody and they bring on a team and they squeeze the creative juices out of them, and they even manage oftentimes to to get that creative potential from that team, to really get them invested in the project, to make them care about the project, because like we're here to make games, we love making games, and then the minute that game is out and making money, or the minute it doesn't quite perform, they all get laid off and fired and are thrown into a heinous job market. That part to me is the biggest travesty of games right now and for the past 5 years, and it feels to me like worker co-op, as you say, even if y'all had to agree to lay off, even if you ran out of money, there's at least, first of all, you're at least still a member. You at least still have a stake in the company. You at least still have some way to stay connected to the thing that you care about and gave yourself to. And then also, hopefully, you're going to make some choices that are more about keeping workers in line and keeping them employed rather than just firing for the sake of firing. Feels to me like a really beautiful sentiment. All right.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, what do you want for yourself, and what would you want for other people, right? And like those, like that's a really nice position to be making decisions from. Like, what do you want for yourself and other people?
Yes, I got distracted. Sorry, Amani dropped the comment. How many layoffs until we make a guillotine building co-op?
Love that.
Yeah.
And
All
also,
right.
I just want to say,
Yeah.
I just want to say add one last thing.
Mhm.
Like, it's like when you own the work you're doing, you just care about it more.
Yeah.
Like I have never cared about like projects this much at like any other studio I worked for. Where like it's like, okay, I'm just like a hired person. I do not it's like I may want to feel a sense of ownership over the work I've done, but that can be taken away from me at any moment. And that like does things to the way you as a developer relate to the work that you do.
Mm. I love it. All right, let's get into some community questions. The first one is from Amani here. who's asked me to read the question for them. The question is, how do you structure profit share within your co-op? How does it work with new people joining? I think we pretty much answered that second one, but the first one especially. New question.
Basically, since we don't pay dividends, we pay salary. So, if you're working full time, one of the reasons we don't have a fourth member right now is because we can't yet necessarily guarantee that we're going to be able to give that person long-term work, a long-term salary, because of the nature of the industry and the way that things are right now. But if we were to hypothetically hire a fourth person and bring them on as a member, they would have worked with us for about 6 months to a year already. We would be paying them, at kind of whatever amount of time that we're working. We don't necessarily track hours very stringently because we think that's a pain in the butt. But there are times where, because I'm doing other contracts, I'm working part-time with Soft Chaos. There are times where I'm working full-time. And so for example, Squinky is our full-time member right now, most frequently. And so we pay Squinky a full-time salary, and then if I'm doing a certain amount of work on a project, I expect it's going to take 20 hours a week of my time, then I'm working, half time. So, we just pay according to the work that's being done as much as we can. There's still some sweat equity involved because we're in the founding stage still. Even a couple of years into it, because we have a kind of degrowth philosophy. We'd rather grow slowly and sustainably than hire someone for a couple months and then have to fire them again. You're a member, now you're not. We can't afford you anymore, or something like that.
Yeah.
So basically that's the way that we work in terms of how pay works. Anything
and
you want to add, Squinky?
oh yeah, and then to add to that, basically because we take on a bunch of different projects, for instance, we may have a contract to work with a nonprofit on developing them an educational game, and that has a particular bucket of money, and then we kind of decide together, it's okay, this goes to this salary, this goes to this salary, and so on, and this goes to other expenses, this and so we for each project we develop a budget, and then portion off that budget accordingly, depending on who is going to be doing what, and I guess maybe there's be a grant that came with a certain amount of money, and then we decide it's how much of that is salaries, and for whom, and for what, and how much of that do we invest back into the co-op in order to pay various expenses we have during the year, paying our accountants, or paying for web hosting on various services, and other things we need to use to keep our business running. We have a physical space now. How much do we use to pay the rent? So how much upkeep goes into stuff for our office?
And then there's
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Squinky.
Go ahead.
And then there's our own, IP, our own creative projects, like Strangers on the Net, which is linked up above, which is something that we developed. We had a very small amount of funding, but we also use some of our runway and time to be able to build it ourselves into something that we wanted to work on, even though the amount of money that we got from this theater festival was very tiny. So some of the reinvestment goes into okay, we're giving ourselves time and space to work on our own projects on top of client work, because we're a service job, meaning that we do client work to for the bulk of our stuff, and then our own games get made using the runway that gives us.
Yeah. So if Strangers on the Net hopefully makes us lots and lots of money, then we decide how to distribute that.
That's amazing. Awesome. Okay, we've got our second question is from Petunio. Petunio's on stage. Petunio, I want to ask about members that are more key than others.
Yeah, thinking about how its software originally was very, very co-op, and then John Carmack just took over everything? What happens when one member is a little bit more key than the other? Like in this case, it was a programmer that did the engine. So, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I think that it sort of depends how you value the labor. Like we actually talk a lot about admin work and like making sure that admin work gets the respect that it deserves. But at least in our co-op, and this is not something that you have to do, everyone gets paid the same. And you just heard how we decide, to divide the budget for each project based on the amount of people that people work, the amount of time that people work. So basically for us, we don't have like a rock star mentality. We think that like we really shore each other up in terms of our skills and our abilities. So like, you would have to decide what happens, I guess, for your co-op. For us, we're kind of like, we don't really believe in like, that kind of isolated genius that like is like, ahead of the curve and needs no help from anyone else in their brilliance, because, somebody's gotta do the accounting, somebody's gotta, handle the less glamorous work, and those people, we love them.
And I add that I've done a lot of solo dev work, so it's like I can make a game all by myself if I want to, but there is just a lot that like I benefit. That like there are a lot of ways that I personally benefit when I get to work with other people, and just like having the humility to understand that is, I guess, like part of growing up and living in a society.
That's pretty. This is one that I'm curious about because I think like a potential naysayer or just somebody who may be nervous about starting a co-op. I think the nightmare scenario is one of your members who maybe at some point was fantastic, now kind of sucks, and maybe doesn't really pull their fair share. How do you handle a situation like that? I'm assuming there's some kind of something written to the bylaws about when you can terminate a membership, but then also like maybe they're not. What do you do in a situation where they're not terminable? They're not that bad, but they just aren't as good as you would hope.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, for me, I think there's usually like systemic causes underlying that. Each one of us has at different points, in our career, like burnt out or like needed a break or like needed support. And like, I think like that, like we would probably look for like, hey, like, kind of like a reason, like what's going on? Like, do you need some time? Do you have lower capacity right now? And that would just mean like, okay, so like, maybe you're not going to be full-time on this project, or maybe you need some time before moving into like a firing process. If there was someone who really needed to be fired, then yes, the bylaws absolutely have provisions for that. And so like we would lean on those bylaws if need be, but like first we would try to get at the human element, I think.
Yeah, because like most of it, like in most cases, like usually if somebody's underperforming, it's because they have something else going on in their lives. And we in particular like really care about like burnout and mental health, and we care about each other's lives outside of work. And like and so like we try to talk amongst ourselves and deal with it, but also every month we see a therapist and go to group therapy together, and
That's
of course
amazing.
like it's really lovely because we have this kind of like space where we can go to like have a professional help us talk through things that are difficult. And we consider that to kind of be like preventative maintenance. Like, because like it kind of like in a way prevents things from getting like so bad that you have to talk about firing somebody. So like it's like you don't get to the point where you have all these like built up resentments for months and years and no way to actually talk about them. It's like we have this space where we can bring these issues up before they get to a boiling point. And yeah. I mean, like, obviously, this is an approach that might not necessarily scale, because it's easier since we have 3 people instead of like 15 or whatever. But having a way to like have some kind of mediated conversation or some way to like feel safe in bringing up issues, so that they don't get to like that bad of a point is very very key here.
Yeah, find
That's
your
amazing.
version of 3-person group therapy, whether that's like, yeah, having a mediator on call or like some forum for people to be able to speak to each other and work those things out.
I love that. Awesome. All right. Third question is Christy here. Christy, you want to jump in with your question?
Sure. Hi. Thank you so much. This has been like super informative, especially for somebody who has like recently founded a business myself, co-founded a business. So yeah, thank you.
Congrats.
But my question, I believe that you touched on it a little bit before, but I was curious, do all members of the co-op like work collectively on the same game all the time, or is it more segmented? Like some members will work on A game while other members will work on B game, with the common goal of making money for the business.
That depends. That depends on the co-op for sure. In our case, like we definitely are working on multiple projects at once and have different people, in leadership roles or like in charge of a project, and then other members assisting. Maybe they're doing more of the work or less of the work. So Squinky and I, for example, are on a project that Allison is not doing any work on. But Allison is also, taking the lead on another project simultaneously. So we have a bunch of things on the go, and like, yeah, we're working it out together. But that's something that like, you can absolutely make work for you. But yeah, then you sort of that's where like, deciding where the budget is going for a particular project in case, there's people that are not working on a project that's like a huge, maybe it's a huge moneymaker. Then what are you reinvesting to the co-op? What are you like, giving to like runway for salaries? Those things are important to consider when dividing up the work that way, I think.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, super interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy.
Pleasure.
All right. And then last question of the day is from Amani again. Amani asks, what are your plans for rights and IP if anyone ever leaves? Do they stay with the co-op?
Uh, Pretty well. Yeah, like Soft Chaos is the publisher and the owner of like the things that we've self-published. And anything else I guess might depend on future deals with whoever might be involved in that. But yeah, basically, yes. The IP belongs to Soft Chaos. That being said, right now, and like, that's one of the challenges is things depending on amicability, right? Right now we're kind of like, oh, okay, well, if Squinky wanted to use a universe that we had invented together to make another game in and had left Soft Chaos, like I would probably be fine with that. We might make some kind of agreement based on like, the name recognition or how well things go, but like I think that would be negotiable.
Yeah, definitely. Again, it's all about like what you as workers decide.
Amazing. All right, this has been a really interesting episode. I last time when I sat down in the hall at GDC and listened to y'all talk, I was like, this is fascinating. Maybe I have to play around with this, and that's exactly how I'm feeling again. So I think that's a good sign. Before we say goodbye, we always like to do two things though. So one is, could you please give us a homework assignment for the audience to do in the next week? It'll take about an hour to practice or explore some of what we talked about here today.
Yes. Okay. So, we have basically it's a series of questions. We also had these in our GDC talk about sustainability. So, I'm just finding that slide because for some reason I clicked off of it.
I
Yes.
can
Okay.
copy. Oh, you want me
I
to
can read it
copy?
aloud while you copy paste it. Okay, sure. So, we would like you to think about what makes your work in games sustainable and what sustainability means for you in your work. So, what do you need to sustain your practices, as well as if you're thinking about sustainability in the social, ecological, political sense. What gives you as a creator or as a studio energy and joy, and what takes it away? What financial viability goals do you have? Do you need to meet particular targets to stay in operation? And is there any flexibility there? Who do you want to work with within and outside of your studio? What shared values are non-negotiable? And are you all aligned on those wishes if you're doing this with a group? And finally, what are your access needs? What pace do you work at? How many projects can you switch between at a time? And what environment do you need to thrive?
That's beautiful. Awesome.
That into the chat.
Amazing. Yeah. So for those who are listening, I'll summarize that. So the Softcast team, or at least 2/3 of the team, is asking you to do a little bit of thoughtful homework about what for the sake of understanding what a studio or a co-op might look like. So one, what gives you as a studio energy? 2, what financial viability goals does your studio have? What do you have? 3, who do you want to work with? And 4, what are your access needs? What pace do you work at? The questions are a little bit more in-depth than that. We'll put them down below in the description, I think, so you can check them out yourself. Write up some answers to those questions. It's a good, thoughtful exercise. And then do me a favor, get a little courage, and post them up on LinkedIn for us. You can tag us at the Indie Game Academy. You can tag Soft Chaos. And you can, of course, tag Jess and Squinky here. It is the Squinkifer and Jess Rowan Markov. And we will all be very excited that you did the homework and give you some thoughts. All right, before we say goodbye, anything y'all want to plug?
2 things I want to plug. The first is we are going to be part of a LARP festival called Make a Scene with a game called Thunder Only Happens When It's Raining. That's happening in August if you happen to be in Minneapolis. This is a game about being a band on tour forever in purgatory until you work your business out, let's say. So take a look at that.
It's also based on Fleetwood Mac's Rumors album.
Yes, we are inspired by Fleetwood Mac, and the thought of having to sing about your breakup forever because it becomes your most popular album. And second, we talked a bit about this before. Strangers on the Net is one of our favorite games that we have ever designed. It led Allison to meet and marry her wife. So we would love for you to follow the pre-launch page for this campaign. We love this game. We think you'll love it too. Many of y'all are already Discord users. It's a play-by-post game that has meant a lot to many people that have played it. And if you follow now, you get a Pog designed by us, a Pog Slammer specifically. And that's as an STL or as a physical reward, depending how you back, if you decide to back. But it also helps support us and give us resources for the actual campaign because this is through RPG Party on GameFound, which is like a special event. So please follow Strangers on the Net.
Beautiful. Awesome. There will be links to the homework assignment as well as both of those links in the description down below if you're listening to this podcast after the fact. I think that's going to be it. Any last words of wisdom from either of y'all?
Take care of yourselves. Don't burn out. Rest is important.
Beautiful. I mean, that's a great last sentiment.
Agreed.
All right, well,
100%.
be good. All right, I think that's going to do it for this episode of today. Jess and Swinky, thank you so much for being here. It's been a great eye-opening episode, and I'm grateful that y'all gave us a little bit of your time. To those who are here in the chat and watching live, thank you for being here and asking your own questions. As always, we will be here again every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, so join us in Discord for the next one, ask your own questions live. And as always, if you enjoyed the episode, who is one other person who might want to learn about worker co-op that you could pass along this episode to for us? All right, I think that's going to do it. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you. Very much big love, and thank you for your time.
Game over.